Director for BLS Global. As you're probably aware, we're one of the leading companies when it comes to multimedia platforms, devoting in helping investors, especially recognized in the field of residency and citizenships. And we've organized many events internationally and globally. And today we're delighted to be hosting an event in Pakistan, in Lahore. We really appreciate your time here. We do have industry experts that are going to give you a full breakdown of the latest updates in terms of the market. We obviously are based in London. Apologies, I could not be there live, but we do have a lot of people that are coming here virtually. We do have a team to help answer a number of questions. There are experts there. It's your chance to speak to them directly and obviously get as much as information as possible. Today, it's going to be myself and Iram here, who's a Pakistani that will actually moderate this session. And we do have a lot of people asking us questions overseas. You've probably seen a number of these the flyers going out, but we do have industry experts. They've come from wonderful time zones from the US and Canada, and as well as London. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Iram. Please, if you may start.
Thank you, Sam. And Assalamu alaikum, Pakistan. मेरा नाम इरम खोकर है and मैं MSA मोना शाह एसोसिएट्स ग्लोबल के ऑफिस से मैनहट्टन से लाइव आपके साथ हूँ और हमें बहुत खुशी है कि पहली दफ़ा इंडस्ट्री लीडर्स वेटरन्स ऑफ इमिग्रेशन इंडस्ट्री पहली दफ़ा पाकिस्तान में लाइव पाकिस्तानी ऑडियंस के साथ बात करेंगे. मैं शुरू में जल्दी से एक मुख्तसर इंट्रोडक्शन देना चाहूँगी जो पैनल आज हमारे साथ है यूएस के बारे में, कैरिबियन के बारे में और बाकी ममालिक के बारे में जो आपको बता सकता है. सो लेट मी इंट्रोड्यूस फर्स्ट मोना शाह. मोना शाह ओरिजिनली बरतानिया में पैदा हुई और कुछ 25-30 साल पहले अमेरिका आई. मोना उनमें से हैं जिनके पास ड्यूल लाइसेंस है, जो ब्रिटेन में भी काम कर चुकी हैं और पिछले 30 साल से अमेरिका में काम कर रही हैं. यूएस इमिग्रेशन की एक्सपर्ट हैं. यूएस इमिग्रेशन पे किताबें लिख चुकी हैं, अवार्ड याफ्ता हैं, बेशुमार इंटरनेशनल पैनल्स पे स्पीकर रह चुकी हैं, प्रेजेंटेशंस कर चुकी हैं. ये उनमें से हैं जिन्होंने यूएस इमिग्रेशन और ग्लोबल इमिग्रेशन का उतार चढ़ाव देखा है और एक की एडवाइज़र है. मोना बेशुमार अवार्ड्स के अलावा यूएस में टॉप 25 लॉयर्स में पिछले 10-12 साल से मानी जाती हैं. तो ना सिर्फ क्लाइंट्स इनके पास आते हैं पर बेशुमार बाकी लॉयर्स भी इनसे मशवरा लेते हैं. तो आज हम काफ़ी लकी हैं कि हमारे साथ मोना मौजूद हैं और जो सवाल हम करना चाहें आप करना चाहें कर सकते हैं. उसके बाद मैं चलूँगी मिस्टर सैम बायत की तरफ. मिस्टर सैम बायत पिछले 30 सालों से इस इंडस्ट्री में हैं, इस इंडस्ट्री के वेटरन हैं. 1993 से इस बिजनेस में इन्वॉल्व हैं और ये उनमें पहले हजरात हैं जिन्होंने 1993 में इमिग्रेशन ऑफिस खोला था दुबई में और कनाडा को रिप्रेजेंट किया था. 2007 में उसका नाम बदल के बयात लीगल सर्विसेज कर दिया था. मिस्टर बायात ग्लोबल प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे एज अ स्पीकर, एज एन एडवाइज़र, गवर्नमेंट्स को एडवाइस देते हैं बिसाइड्स क्लाइंट. कनेडियन गवर्नमेंट के साथ जुड़े हुए हैं और इमिग्रेशन पे एडवाइस देते हैं. बेशुमार पैनल्स पे बात करते हैं और हर मुल्क के कैरिबियन, कनाडा और वेरियस अदर कंट्रीज इन द वर्ल्ड उन सब के बारे में इनकी नॉलेज बेशुमार है. सो आज हम सैम बायत से हर मुल्क के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं. एक वेल्थ ऑफ नॉलेज है जो पाकिस्तान में आज आपके साथ बात करेंगे. मोना और सैम के साथ साथ हमारे साथ रिबेका सिंह हैं, who is also a partner at Mona Shine Associates Global. रिबेका के पास अबाउट 15 साल का एक्सपीरियंस है, बहुत लीडिंग लॉयर हैं। इन्होंने भी बेशुमार पैनल्स पे बात की है और बेशुमार कंट्रीज में यूएस इमिग्रेशन पे स्पेशलाइज्ड पब्लिक स्पीकिंग की है। रिबेका की एक्सपर्टीज EB-5 इमिग्रेशन में है और इन्होंने बहुत मुश्किल, क्रिटिकल, कॉम्प्लेक्स केसेस को डील किया है। आजकल रिबेका यूनाइटेड किंगडम UK में बेस्ड हैं और MSA की पार्टनर भी हैं। सो बयात लीगल सर्विसेज, MSA, इन सब के ऑफिसेज न्यूयॉर्क में भी हैं, जहां आज मोना आपसे मुखातिब है, जहां से और मैं मुखातिब हूँ। UK में ऑफिसेज हैं और दुबई में ऑफिसेज हैं और हम अब पाकिस्तान में भी आने वाले हैं। सो ये था ब्रीफ इंट्रोडक्शन जितना मैं दे सकती थी, और अब सवालात की तरफ चलते हैं। तो कुछ सवालात जो हमेशा हर एक के दिमाग में होते हैं, उनसे I'll open the panel and the floor, and that would be कि इमिग्रेशन तो बहुत सालों से मौजूद है, लेकिन पिछले 10 से 15 सालों में इमिग्रेशन में एक बूम आया है। सडनली बहुत सी इमिग्रेशंस खुली हैं। So dear panel, I would now like to ask you all the question about immigration and the changes that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. So, Mona, over to you.
I'm sorry, Varun. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I apologize. What was your question again?
Right. So, what we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years, that there has been a lot of shift in overall global immigration. There are some key countries like the US and Canada and UK, but at the same time, there has been a shift, and a lot of other countries have opened up, and people are moving into or looking at immigration overall.
That's correct.
So yourself and Mr. Sam, would you also like to add to this shift that you're seeing?
Okay. Well, I think as a lot of people will understand, that back in the day when my parents first came to the United Kingdom, which was in the early 60s, it really was only the UK, possibly a few people in America, but Canada. Sam, won't you agree? At those days, it was UK, Canada, and these three countries. The rest of the world really wasn't an option back in the 60s.
Well, definitely, I think the shift happened in 2012 when Canada, which was a primary taker of business applicants, business immigrants, stopped their Canada Federal Investor Program, and we saw also the rise of the Caribbean CBIs. So, if you ask me, 2012 is the moment. But yes, definitely, our world has changed, where initially there were the skill to Canada, the business immigrants, and no one talked about citizenship by investment or residency by investment. And now I would say citizenship by investment is taking the bulk of the applicants at 10, 15,000 applications a year.
Well, also people's needs have changed. When you're talking about immigration, maybe, well, in Canada, there was quite a few people who came from China when Hong Kong was handed over from the British back to China. But thereafter, it was people who wanted to come for business and for work to improve their life, basically. Whereas now, since 2012, you're quite right. I believe that is a good time. It's different. I think people, what we are seeing, they want more mobility, not necessarily just immigration.
Oh, definitely. And I think another important date is post-COVID, because people realize that with suddenly now with the world being integrated, we can suddenly lose access. You know, if you want to access the Schengen zone, well, you must be a resident only, or if you want to access a certain country, you must be a citizen. And that's why I think post-COVID, people are being a little more aware of having access. And of course, also modern business. I remember first time I came to Dubai in 1993 to set up my office. Traveling between Canada and US, Canada and the UAE was so difficult. But now there are direct flights going from Toronto, Montreal, New York. So access has become easier. So if you have a meeting, you want to be able to hop on a plane and go see your business partner. So you need to have a passport that can allow you to travel easily.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the dynamics have changed from the 60s. If we're, moving forward, then you saw shifts from the 80s. That's when the Caribbean, St. Kitts opened. And then, of course, now we're talking about today. And I think everyone just, like you said, the mobility, the freedom to travel. I think before everyone, like we said, they wanted to travel for either business opportunities, and thinking those business opportunities were only in those big powerhouse countries. So I think today, just having the freedom to know that there's so many different other options now. And I think today it's good for everyone to know, hey, it's not only the US, it's not only Canada, but there's so many other options, and some may be right for you and some may not. So I think it's important to understand what is there. There's immigrant visas that in the US, for instance, that are temporary. So you could come and see whether you like the US, you can make it permanent. So there's so many different choices, and that you just have to make sure you see which is right for you.
And I think we make a good group because we're all immigrants. I mean, I went to Canada in the early 70s. Mona, you were born in UK. Same thing with Rebecca. So I think we've experienced immigration from the perspective of our parents, newcomers. We've experienced living in a different country as people that when they're either born or when they're as a young age. I mean, my cousin Pesh, who works with me in Dubai, he went to Canada. He was 3 years old. So that's a different perspective. I mean, migrating as an adult is one thing. Migrating as a child is another thing. And now, of course, with the CBIs. So that it's the world is much easier for us now as professionals to advise properly our clients.
Well, in addition to that, I think being a professional and having worked both in the United Kingdom and for a long time now in the United States, I think we really are in a situation where we can advise on a different sort of front, because there are other matters, as Rebecca correctly says. You may want to come here in the United States for a few years. This may not be the place you want to live. And in our experience, many of our clients want to come for training. For example, they want to become a doctor and they want to have a US sort of certificate or a Canadian certificate, and they don't want to stay here. They want to go back home, whether it be to India or to Pakistan or to China. And they want to come back with a professional degree from here. So it's not necessary that people come and they want to immigrate. And I think for that reason, I know you have a number of questions relating to E2, which is what Rebecca was alluding to, as a temporary visa.
Yes, and I'm sorry. I think there's a little bit of static and delayed on the screen. So I was trying to ask the question, but it was not coming through. So before we move on to U.S. immigration, I would like, as all three of you are lawyers, and we have a lot of consultants in Pakistan who do exactly this. So I would like you to explain the difference and the importance. So before you begin, before you begin, let me just say the same thing in Urdu. So नाजरीन, मैंने ये जानने की कोशिश की और ये सवाल किया है कि इस वक्त हमारे साथ तीनों पैनलिस्ट जो मौजूद हैं वो लॉयर्स हैं, और इमिग्रेशन का काम बहुत से कंसल्टेंट्स भी करते हैं. तो दोनों में फ़र्क क्या है? लॉयर्स के साथ क्यों जाना चाहिए, कंसल्टेंट्स के साथ क्यों जाना चाहिए या क्यों नहीं जाना चाहिए? इमिग्रेशन जब आप इमिग्रेशन करते हैं तो एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट स्टेप लेते हैं टू चूज द राइट पार्टनर्स, कि आप लॉयर्स एज योर पार्टनर यूज कर रहे हैं या क्लाइंट्स. ये जानना और समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है. सो Sam, Mona, and Rebecca, please help us understand the importance and the difference.
Okay. Sam, would you like to start? Then I can take over.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest difference is liability. We
Mm.
have a professional liability insurance in case mistakes happens. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but if it does, as I always say, is necessary precautionary measures. You need to prevent, you need to foresee problems, and of course, with a lawyer, the professional indemnity insurance is a big deal. Of course, the numbers of years of education, the credibility, all these things are important factors. Um, Also, the biggest problems I see with consultants, I mean, I was just approached yesterday by someone who applied for Canadian immigration as an investor, and now the consultant has simply disappeared. I mean, and he doesn't know what to do. So he's left alone. So he wants me to take over the case, which we will. But it's very difficult because, there's a lot of things that were done. Now, the person on top of being accepted as an investor, he has applied for his permanent residency, has 3 visa refusals for Canada, and he wants to come and check their place before he gets his permanent residency to plan his eventual move. So all those are important factors. The consultant might sound
Sam,
good because he's cheaper,
also,
but there's more.
so also tell us about knowledge of law as lawyers, because laws change in
Well,
different countries.
Mona?
If I can interrupt here, Sam, just before I answer your question, Niram, and with no disrespect to any consultant who is sitting there, but many a time a consultant doesn't have that wide range of knowledge, as you mentioned, Iram. And secondly, as lawyers, we don't take commissions. So when we speak to a client, we will tell you exactly what we believe is correct for you. Given our knowledge of the different countries, of your background, it could be that America, for example, is a perfect place, but you are not able to adjust your status here for one reason or the other. And why go through a long period and then to find that out? It could be that it's just if you want to be out for a temporary period, it's not the country for you. Maybe the UK is, maybe Portugal is, maybe neither of them is, and all you need is citizenship from a Caribbean country. So it is understanding a lot of different aspects, including issues which may happen at the consulate. And that's another issue I think we are a little different from consultants because we do go and we argue with the consulates for our clients. We know where to go. We know who to speak to. We're often members of different associations relating to immigration lawyers who have background and who have the ability to be able to go out and challenge decisions, adverse decisions, which unfortunately we're seeing a lot of from Islamabad.
Yeah, and if I can add on to what Mona is saying, we're here from the beginning to the end. Right. So as long as you need us we're here, whether it's for the law, whether it's for choosing which option is right for you. We're just not going to run away. I mean, we've been in this practice for so many years, and we're just not going to, we have a staff, we have offices, we can't just run away from it.
Yeah. So मोना ने ये बहुत अच्छी एक और important बात कही कि besides the knowledge as lawyers, accessibility एक बहुत important element होता है कि as lawyers ये consulates को email कर सकते हैं, बात कर सकते हैं, यहाँ पे जो institutions हैं उनको लिख सकते हैं और इन्हें जवाब मिलता है जो consultant को access नहीं होता. So ये एक बहुत important aspect है when you go with a lawyer. So now keeping that in mind, let's move into the US immigration because being a Pakistani myself, और जितने पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त हमारे साथ नाज़रीन बैठे हैं वो सब समझते और जानते हैं कि the pains they go through अगर US का visit visa भी लेना हो. So let's enter and speak about US immigration and the different types of visas that are available or immigration options available for US. So one of them is E2 visas. So Mona and Rebecca, both of you being the experts on it, would you like to share a little bit with the audience? What is E2 visa?
All right, I'll start. Rebecca, do jump in. So an E2 is a non-immigrant visa. What does that mean? It's an investment visa. It doesn't give you a green card. It will give you temporary entrance. But saying that, we do have clients who have remained on the E2 for many years because for one reason or the other, they don't want to have a permanent green card here, and they can live here, they can do business, they can run a business. Their wife or their spouse can get a work permit, and their children are also on the status. However, E2s don't suit everyone. And one of the biggest disadvantages of an E2 is that if you have children who are approaching 21, they will drop off. It doesn't include children over 21. One of the advantages of a D2 that is particularly important for many of our clients from Pakistan is the fact that you don't have to have a high amount of money to come in. You can come in at a lower amount. I mean, there is no ballpark figure. If you say, well, I want to put 50,000 or 100,000, yes, you can. It's not always recommended. It is recommended to be higher for a certain reason. We have to show the consulate when you go for your visa that you are able to maintain yourself and the business. And practically speaking, an E2 at 50,000, unless your costs are very low, really isn't enough money to carry a business through and maintain yourself and your family.
And that's why I think, going into the E2 is a business, you have to be 50% ownership in a business. And it's important to know where do you want to set up? And that's where
my next question.
Yeah.
And I'll speak in Urdu first. कि ये तो समझ आ गई कि E2 के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा नहीं चाहिए, लेकिन फिर भी चाहिए अगर बिजनेस शुरू करनी है. कहाँ पे करना बेहतर होगा? न्यूयॉर्क में करना, सैन फ्रांसिस्को में करना, टेक्सास में करना? और उससे क्या फर्क पड़ता है? So would you share with us if the business one decides to open in a different state? Does that make a difference? Does that have an impact? Please.
So something I'd like to mention right now, because Sam will talk to you about a lot of other different countries. And this particular point that we are going to bring out now doesn't focus on other countries. And that is the fact that in the United States, it's a business. The business has to run. If you do, we're talking E2 now, but you still have to create jobs. If you do an EB5, you have to create jobs. You have to run a business. It's not that you put some money in, you buy a house and say, I'm going to do an E2 because I've invested in a property. It has to be an operational business. So if you're talking about how much money you're going to invest in a city like San Francisco, it's very different to investing in somewhere in Texas, which is much cheaper than Northern California. So the costs are very different. So again, your scale of business is very different.
So in terms of business, does it have to be business that is started from scratch? Can a business be purchased? Can it be in joint venture with a friend? Rebecca just mentioned that an investor must own at least 50%.
Okay.
Yes. So there's many options, and so we could discuss each option with each individual. But you can purchase a business. You can have existing employees, but the business has to continue to run. And that's when we discuss the EB5 program, you'll see a bit of difference and why the E2 sometimes might work better than the EB5 program for others, or how you can create an E2 to make it an EB5 program. But for an E2, yes, you can purchase an existing business. You can go into partnerships as long as you are 50% of the business. And you can continue to run it as long as you want to. It doesn't necessarily say that you have to run it for a certain time period. We've had plenty of clients in the past, as Mona said, who've stayed in the US on the E2 visa for 20 plus years. But we've had others who said, okay, 5 years was enough, and just let go of the business and let go of the E2. And I think it's also important to note too, where you are, ease of travel. Because a lot of people, where I think they don't realize with the E2, you don't have to meet any residency requirements for the US on the E2 visa. So I think that's important, because maybe sometimes, yes, you're running the business. You have to operate and to make sure you're directing the business, but it doesn't mean to say you have to be there all year. You could come in for a few months at a time. You could come in every so often, and that's the luxury of having the E2 visa for the ease of travel as well.
Yeah, and I think the stay is an important issue. Sam, you do have a stay in Canada? Stay?
Yes, when you get your permanent residency, I mean, not on temporary residency like the E2, there's no minimum. But if you have a permanent residency, yes, we have the new rule, which is in any 5-year period, Article 28.2, in any 5-year period, you need to be physically present for 2 years, 730 days. But about the E2, there's two things I like to, because I'm seeing viewers there are also viewers from outside of Pakistan. E2 is applicable only to Pakistanis in our region. I mean, in the GCC, Iran, India, they don't qualify for E2. Only Turkey would. And later on, we'll talk about it. In our industry, the migration industry, there's two types of program: active engagement and passive. E2 is an active engagement. You need to run your business. You cannot just buy a business and let it, I guess, you correct me if I'm wrong, you cannot just buy, a McDonald's and say, that's it, I have a McDonald's, it's going to run by itself and I don't have to do anything. You have to show hands-on. Yes, correct?
You can get a manager, but you need to have control, at least financial control. But that's a very good point that we did bring up, and I can tell you, Mira, we get this all the time, especially as we have a lot of Indian clients, and they say, well, why can't we do E2? No, only certain countries can have E2, and the E2 was actually granted to Pakistan at a time when Bangladesh was part of Pakistan, and that's why Bangladesh got E2, because of Pakistan. Not a lot of people know that, and it was granted well back in the 70s. And India never received the ability to do E2, and they would love to do E2 today, but they can't.
Iranians had it; they lost it during Trump presidency. Yeah. He canceled the friendship agreement.
Which was a shame. That was a shame. That is one of the disadvantages, I would say, about being in E2. I mean, I don't see them canceling. Well, the Trump presidency is if we have a Trump presidency again, may bring other issues, but the E2 is not as permanent as if you come in on a business for that reason, because it is run through what's called a treaty agreement, and if the president or some Congress decides to cancel that agreement, then you lose your ability to have an E2.
मोना, बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट और अच्छा पॉइंट ये मोना ने कहा है. नाजरीन ये प्लीज नोट करें that E2 is based on a treaty. Now, पाकिस्तान उस ट्रीटी का हिस्सा है आज, लेकिन ये कल बदल सकता है और ये आपको परमानेंट रेजिडेंसी का ऑप्शन नहीं देता. बहुत से लोग हैं जो ताजिर हैं और बिजनेस करना चाहते हैं, उनके लिए सूट करता है वो यहाँ आके बिजनेस करें, और इसमें वो टैक्सेस नहीं अप्लाई होंगे जो एक यूएस सिटीजन को होते हैं, लेकिन वो ट्रीटी कभी भी बदल सकती है. बेस्ड ऑन दिस मैं अब चलूंगी टुवर्ड्स Caribbeans and Caribbean nationality, citizenship and so on, जो आजकल काफी उरूज पे है. So Sam, Bayat, you have been an expert, you have in-depth knowledge, you have been in touch with the governments of the Caribbean countries. Would you like to share your knowledge of how Caribbean citizenship is panning out? Time frame, investments, how's that going? Agar koi Caribbean may interested in.
Well, thank you. Well, the whole industry of citizenship by investment has been there for the past 30, 40 years. I mean, St. Kitts is one of the early ones in early 80s, but I think the whole industry in the Caribbean started in 2007 when St. Kitts started their sugar diversification fund for donations. But it really kicked off when they got their Schengen zone access, and then Dominica next, and all the other Caribbeans. And so today it's an attractive proposition because it's passive, where you apply within a few months, you have a citizenship, and you have a passport that allows you to travel to 130, 40 different countries. Comparing it to Pakistani passport, where you have very limited number of countries you can access, maybe 20, 30. Suddenly acquiring Dominica citizenship, for example, which many have, or Grenada or other countries in the Caribbean, you go up to 140 plus countries you can travel visa free. So that's a tremendous possibility. Another interesting aspect of the Caribbean passports are the fact that you can include extended family. For example, in UK, you can only include your children up to the age of 18. Canada is 22, US is 21. Most of the programs around the world stop to include your children up to the age of 18. But in the Caribbeans, they have been a little more in tune with realities where children stay longer with the family, so they're more considered dependents. So the children can go up to 25, 28. You can also include your parents. So this parents from your spouse, your parents, and you can also include some of the younger siblings which are unmarried. So that allows a generational planning as to, okay, we want to have access and we could travel all together, or in terms of security, if something happens, we can all move together. But when you look at Canada, for example, you can only bring your children up to the age of 22. You cannot bring your parents. You need to sponsor them. We allow parental sponsorship, only 10,000 applications a year, which is nearly impossible. And it's delays. It takes time, 1, 2, 3 years to get your visa. Quebec investors goes up to 5, 6 years to get a permanent residency. But the Caribbean programs, within roughly 6 months, you get a citizenship and you can travel with. And then interesting also is easy to add on future children. So if you have children, it's within a few weeks or months, you can add on your children. So that's why it has become so attractive since 2000, I would say 10, 2012, which happens to be same time Canada refused or canceled 62,000 federal investor program applicants.
Sam, we make fun of this a lot when we're overseas and we're talking to clients, and we say, yes, well, if you want to make sure your mother-in-law doesn't come, go to Canada or America, because the Caribbean will allow you to bring your mother-in-law.
Now, the biggest problem that happened, which is hopefully solved now, or will be solved, is the fact that during the recent year, there was a lot of price fluctuation because of discounting or similar practices. But recently, on the 1st of July, as of 1st of July, all the 5 programs in the Caribbean have decided to uniform their price structure, and it's more different. Actually, I have a slide prepared. Maybe you can show the slide number 10 for people to see that, previously, for example, for a single applicant, it was roughly about 100,000 to 150,000 to get the citizenship. But now, as of 1st of July, they have now increased the prices. They're all above 200,000. They've nearly doubled the prices. And now, I was there last week in Dominica. The government is going to be quite strict, making sure people are paying that amount, and to ensure that in the future, when these applicants are going to deal with the government, they will be asked, who processed the application for you? B, how much did you pay? And prove to us you paid these fees. So this is important. From now on, the people must be more accountable as to who they choose and how much they pay. It should be in line with the government prescribed prices. And these are all on their government websites, which we can give them later to them.
Sam, there are a couple of live questions, which have just popped up. And one of the questions was that one candidate has asked, would I be able to qualify for the Caribbean CBI program, even though I have a TRV rejection?
Oh, yes, that's the visit visa thing. Well, earlier, Dominica was quite loose with people who were refused visas, particularly UK. last year, they started to be quite rigorous about refusal. So if you had Canada, US, UK, Schengen refusal, they would refuse your application.
Right.
We argumented with the government. They removed the Canada and US refusal uh, basis to reject applications. And currently, if you have a Schengen or UK refusal, they will reject your application. So yes, if you have previous Schengen or UK refusal, they will not grant you citizenship because with their citizenship, you have visa-free access to Schengen or UK zone, Schengen zone in UK. So yes, if you
Well,
have refusals, you cannot apply.
well,
So the remedy would be to apply, get a visa, travel, then apply. I hope that
and
answers the question.
one thing I would like to point out when you're talking about rejections is that we do recommend that if you receive a rejection, you don't sit on it. You challenge it, unless there's something there that you can't challenge. I don't know if you have that same advice for anybody going to Canada who's been rejected, Sam.
Uh, Yes and no. Well, for Canada refusal are not linked to permanent residency application
Mhm.
unless there are serious concerns like misrepresentations and your background, like if you worked for a certain organization like in Iran, if you will, with the IRCG. By the way, the same question to you, Mona. The fact that you were refused visitor visa to UK, would that affect your E2 or your EB5
No,
applications?
not necessarily. But we do like to ask our clients to challenge when they do get rejected, if they do get rejected.
Mhm.
But and what we do if there has been a rejection, we actually discuss that rejection in the application as to this is what the rejection was for and why. But it doesn't make any difference per se.
Okay.
Well, that's
Well,
why I think, if I
in
may,
Canada, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say if we do advise when we speak with our clients that you tell us everything from the beginning, because
Yeah,
only then that's how we can help you.
yeah.
And maybe something you may think something may not let you in, but it could be a small fraction compared to the U.S. or the laws differ. Not to say that misrepresentation or fraud, those are major issues, but there's something, traffic violations. Sometimes people think that's a huge issue and it may not be. So we
Mm.
advise that you bring the issue up with us. We always advise that we tell the government from the beginning, we're not trying to hide anything. Here's the issue, and then how to overcome those issues.
By the way,
There's
in
a very
Canada, we have
important
a
point.
formal, just one thing. In Canada, we have a formal process to appeal an officer decision,
Mhm.
especially for visitor visas and student visas. That happens often because they're so busy. And I assume Islamabad, they're extremely busy there. So there's a lot of unjust rejections. Those
Mhm.
could be appealed, and usually it's mostly out of court settlement. How does it work in the US with visit visas? You just said you can make representations.
Yes,
Mona?
you can if there's a rejection, you can file, but it has to be within 30 days of the rejection, a
Mhm.
motion to reconsider and where the officer is wrong and why he's wrong. And we have challenged, and we challenged actually the Caribbean cases as well. We've challenged E2s, which have come from Barbados, and we've succeeded.
Yeah.
So
And what
can
about UK,
can
Mona?
we
Since you're practicing there as well.
With the UK, you can as well. You can go back and you can ask them to reconsider. That question came in a little bit too fast. Can you say?
yeah we
I think Aaron will.
yeah we okay, so the question
Was
is that again it went away. Could we see that again?
Actually, I see it now. It's I read it out, or you have it.
Prior to July 2024, we had different prices for Dominica. Is this fixed now? And I was told by someone that the government will check in the future how we apply.
Well, yes, I just and I just lightly touched it. Well, listen, at no point in time we were supposed to have different prices. For example, Dominica here, they're saying the price was set in the law, but the practice in the industry, primarily with consultants, were the fact that they were finding ways to go around, finding loopholes to reduce the price and to pay less to the government. Um, without the knowledge of the government. And this fact became so important that they decided to clamp down on it. A, they increased the price. B, now they're going to be very strict, making sure people are paying the right amount. Actually, since January, there are interviews for Dominica, and at the selection interview, they do ask clearly, how much are you going to pay, or what is the deal you have? And in the
Yeah.
future, when they want to renew the passport, add a kid or something, they marry, they have to show how much they pay, and then they need to have a proof in hand that they paid
I
the
have an
right
important
amount.
question, Sam, over here. And before we move to EB5 after this, you made an important point that people go around the system and pay less and probably get their immigration in the Caribbean. My
Yes.
question is, and before I repeat it in Urdu, that if the government finds out later, although you've been given the citizenship, and the government finds out later that you went around the system and paid less, what is the status quo of this? So in Urdu, I would like to say कि अगर किसी consultant के through आपने जो required payment है Caribbean countries की उससे कम पे किया है, आपको citizenship मिल गई है और अब government को पता चल गया है, what will be the impact of your citizenship if the government finds out?
Well, the attitude is that you lose it. That's it. And you lose your investment and you lose your citizenship. Actually, something similar happened in Turkey. There have been about thousands of applications where people had cheated on their citizenship application, where the price of the property they purchase is inflated to show their prescribed or the required amount. The government has discovered that, and they're canceling the citizenship when these people come into the country at the airport. When I spoke with the government lawyer, one of the government's lawyer, I told them, well, why don't you give them a chance to pay the difference? Their attitude was, no way. They cheated, they should lose it. They're taking the same attitude in the Caribbean. So you cheated, you lose it. So you cannot even make up the difference or pay the difference. So, and I agree with that. You should know from day one what the laws are and obey by the law. If you happen to slip through the net and pay less, if they catch you, it's retroactive and you lose it. And also, this is important because now that the world is more integrated database, if you lose your citizenship or if your citizenship was revoked in a country, this will become known to other jurisdictions, to other countries. So if you go apply, I don't know, for Canada, and they tell you that, and they ask you this question, have you ever been revoked of citizenship? And you have to say yes. And if you lie, then that's another set of problem. That's misrepresentation now or in the future. So definitively, now that the world is integrated, I do not advise to be smart and pay less.
Yes. Thank you, Sam. I think this is a very, very important point that Sam has communicated, which will move into US, and Mona will probably reiterate the same, that बेहतर है आप lawyers के साथ जाएं जो अच्छी तरह कानून जानते हैं, समझते हैं और आपको सही advice देंगे, instead of finding a way around and pay less, because वो eventually कहीं ज़्यादा cost करेगा. Which now brings me to
before we jump to the I know you want to jump to E2, but sorry, EB5. Sam, we have another issue which has been brought up by one of the viewers. One of the questions are, so you for the Caribbean, you can do both business investments as well as donations.
Yes.
And I know Rebecca and I have visited the Caribbean, and we've looked at a number of projects, as have you. And there were some projects out there which were very good. So one of the questions that we have here is: are these business investments real? Are they sound? Are you going to get your money back from these business investments, or is it all about you just spend the money and you won't get it back?
Well, there has been a lot of mishaps in the Caribbean, but not as much as. Not more than anywhere else. There are excellent projects, like, for example, the company Range, managed by a good friend of mine, Mohammed Asaria. They have built what they promised. Shares are there. And now, for example, in Dominica or in St. Kitts, now that the shares have been hold by the applicants for more than 5 years. We're doing the resale. So we're selling the shares to new applicants, and the new applicants are using this purchase to apply for their citizenship. So yes, there are excellent projects, but there are projects like, for example, in Grenada, there was a fish farm. It was a flop. I mean, people paid, they got a citizenship, but the money disappeared. There's been projects like that in St. Kitts as well. So you just have to be like any other country. You have to be a advised investor and do your own due diligence on the project, on the people selling it, and yes, it could be an excellent investment.
And one other question which has just come up. Oh, yep, you see it's on the screen. Will Dominica get visa free again?
Oh yeah, that was a big issue last year in July. They lost their UK free access because of some mishaps. But last week, when I spoke with the Prime Minister, when I spoke with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Henderson, they told me there are negotiations with the UK government to get some sort of visa access. In my opinion, is going to be the some sort of electronic approval ETA, and hopefully, I would say maybe by beginning next year, they should get this access so they can travel to UK without headaches.
Right. Well, that's one of the purposes of getting that visa. Iram, well, I'm sorry. I know you want to go back to EB5, but there was a question there which we missed. One of the viewers had asked, based on your experience, what percentage of E2 residents are able to get EB5 after some years? So just to answer this, Wasim, thank you so much for this question. This is a different area to go from what's called E2 to EB5. E2 doesn't normally go to EB5. Just before we go into what is EB5, I just want to give our audience a quick tutorial on the immigrant system in the United States. You can get immigration, permanent immigration, through one of two ways. And this all came out in 1990, an act called IMAC 1990, either through family-based or through employment-based. And then there are things in between like asylum, whatever. With employment-based, there are 5 categories. You have EB1, which is for alien of extraordinary ability, professors, and multinational executives. You have EB2, which is skilled workers, which a vast majority of people go through, which right now for Pakistan is absolutely clear. There's no visa issues. And I can tell you...
Can I interrupt? Can you give examples of skilled workers?
Any professional is a skilled. Any worker, any position which requires a degree is usually a skilled worker or periods of experience. And EB3, for example, is an unskilled worker. An unskilled worker could be a chef. EB4 is a special worker, which could be a religious person or an abused spouse. And EB5, which is the category we work on the most, is investment, the investor who comes in and invests a certain amount. Now, for E2 does not automatically jump to EB5. So to answer your question, in order for E2 candidates to go into EB5, they have to adapt their business and their project to fit under the EB5 criteria. It's not automatic. It has to be finagled and sort of crafted.
From the very beginning. So if you're thinking E2 to EB5 for the future, it's something you should discuss with us from the very beginning, because we want to be sure that there are different requirements, right? As we said, one is a non-immigrant visa that's temporary. The EB5 is a way to get your green card and eventual citizenship. So there are more stringent requirements for the EB5 program. So if you want to have an E2 and then have that to EB5, we do need to make sure we have those requirements, and there's specific amounts. For instance, the investment amount is going to be different. The job creation is going to be different. So all of that we'll discuss from the beginning, so that in time it can eventually become an EB5.
And one last point, just before we move on to the topic, is the issue of taxation. A number of people are worried about taxation. They want to work in the US. They want to do businesses in the US, but they don't want to pay the taxes. If you come under an E2 and you stay within a certain limit of days, you can avoid doing worldwide taxes or paying worldwide taxes.
Yeah, that was one of the questions on that, yes. All right. Thank you so much. So let's move on further into EB5. EB5 नाजरीन जैसे मोना ने बताया वो कैटेगरी है जिसमें आप इन्वेस्ट करके इमिग्रेशन स्टेटस हासिल कर सकते हैं जो इवेंचुअली ग्रीन कार्ड और सिटीजनशिप में बदलता है. नाउ कुछ कंट्रीज की इमिग्रेशन लाइक कैरिबियन सिंपल है और जल्दी हो जाती है. US immigration and specifically EB5 is a very complex area, and it does require experts to deal with your case, to submit your case. और इसमें various stages हैं. मोना और रिबेका दोनों इस फील्ड में एक्सपर्ट्स हैं. जैसे मैंने शुरू में कहा था कि इन्होंने हजारों केसेस, कॉम्प्लेक्स और डिफिकल्ट केसेस पे काम किया है और यहाँ न्यूयॉर्क में दोनों को इस पे अवार्ड्स मिल चुके हैं साल दर साल as the top 25 lawyers for EB5. So Mona and Rebecca both, tell us about the EB5 program. What is it and the steps and the timelines involved?
Well, we don't actually have time to go through all of that.
As briefly as you can, because it's an important topic. US immigration is one of the most sought after immigrations. So,
all right. Well, thank you for that question from Ijaz. What's the investment requirement for EB5 and can we start our own business under EB5? Yes, absolutely, you can start your own business. However, you know what you want to start, where you want to start it. If I suddenly wanted to open a coffee shop in Karachi or Lahore, I wouldn't know where to go or which street to put it on or where to get my vendors from. So that's very, very important if you want to start your own business, because this is not about just immigration. This business has to work. This business has to create 10 full-time jobs. You need to make money out of this business, and so that you can pay yourself back and you can show the government that this is a real investment which is going to enhance the US economy.
Yes, I think it's really important conducting your due diligence, whether it's your own project or if it's a project that you want to invest in. It's a developer from the US. Due diligence is very important. And as Mona said, that it's your life, it's your business at the end of the day as well. So you want to make sure whatever you're investing in, you think about the business as well. Think of the immigration. We will work with you. We'll make sure you meet the requirements for the green card at the end of the day, but you need to make sure, you know, it works as a business and it's not going to go away in 6 months' time, in a year. So just be savvy about it.
Right. The question about timeline, which came up, and before I go into that, Sam, one of the reasons a lot of people do like to go into the Caribbean is because it's fast. Mm-hmm. How fast is fast? Sam?
Yes, I lost your
yeah, I said a lot of people like to go into the Caribbean because it's fast. But how fast is fast? How fast is it?
Well, the fastest is St. Kitts because they have an expedited application process where you pay $25,000 extra and they can process your case within 2 months. Dominica is considering setting up the same process, but I think roughly average 6 months you can get a citizenship, new citizenship and passport in your hand, which is extraordinarily good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that really is. Shinam, can you please put on our, there's another question, 10 jobs in the US,
or maybe outside.
Jobs have to be created within the United States to be accepted. No jobs outside. And remote workers is still an issue that we're dealing with, because remote workers is relatively a new concept. And the way that the government looks at it is the place that where you're paying the worker is what really counts. But it's still one of those difficult issues. Sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think, and what's different with the E2, as we discussed earlier, E2, you can buy an existing business. You can buy a business that has employees already there. You can do that with the EB5 program, but you also have to make that extra investment amount, which is $800,000 if it's in a TEA or rural area. And you have to create 10 more jobs unless it's a troubled business. So these are all issues that we would have to discuss. But you have to make sure that you're doing something to stimulate the economy and not just purchasing or acquiring a business.
Right.
That's
Let me
very
just jump in
important
here.
point.
I like to go back to what we were discussing initially. This goes back to really knowing what you want. I mean, is it migration you want? Do you want to really move? Because if you're a successful person in Pakistan and you really don't like Western lifestyle, for example, you have young daughters and you don't want them to be enticed to new ways of living, you'd like to stay where you are, maybe migration is not the right path. The E2 is good. The B5 is different. You must move eventually. You know you're going to lose it. Maybe the Caribbean or maybe some of the European residency or citizenship programs are good for you. So so there should be careful analysis of your needs, your wants, and your desires, and your mode of living.
I think, yeah, long-term goals as well. What we see, Sam, a lot of our clients come to us and may actually want multiple passports. They will go and purchase a Caribbean passport just for, again, ease of travel. You get it quickly. But at the same time, they might be looking to the US or Canada for maybe education for their children. So what they would do is have that quick passport for ease of travel. In the meantime, invest in the US. It is a longer process. So it could take about a year and a half to obtain that green card. And then it's, another 5 years to get their passport. But you can plan that long term. And it's something that a lot of our clients do. So they'll eventually have, multiple passports. I think today's society, we're a global market, and we're seeing quite a lot of people with multiple passports today.
Right.
Absolutely.
Shyam, can you just go to the one of the slides for me, please?
The timeline slide?
Yes, the next one. Next. Next. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
So just as a quick timeline for everybody as to where we are and how long it takes, there are basically 3 stages for EB5. The first stage is the preliminary stage where you're actually doing due diligence, so deciding whether you want to do your own project, go into an existing project or a regional center project. You're engaging your lawyer, you're collecting on the documents, and you're putting your source of funds together. It's the hardest part. It's the heaviest part, the preliminary stage. But let's say you get it all going, and this is, for example, a regional center project, not your own case, your own project that you want to do. You then would transfer your funds to the project's escrow account. Then we submit the petition. Under the new law, we can, if you're in the United States, we can file your adjustment of status, meaning that we can file your green card and work permit immediately. It's called concurrent filing. This wasn't there before. This is new. It came in the new law, the May 2022 EB5 Reform and Integrity Act, and it allows people to immediately get a green card. And if it's your own business, you can immediately start and work, which is wonderful, because previously you'd have to hire a manager or someone unless you had another visa to be in the country. Nowadays, under the new system, it's taking about a year to a year and a half for cases to be adjudicated. And once your case is adjudicated, you receive what's called a 2-year conditional green card. And then if you're outside of the US, you go through consular processing, which I'll let Rebecca speak to in a moment. If you're in the US, you automatically get your green card because you've already applied for it, or you get it without any interview. Following that, you have a 2-year period where you have to hold your temporary green card, and we have to show that jobs have been created. And at the end of that 2-year period, we file the final petition, which is called an 829, where we show the government your money has been spent correctly, it's been sustained, and that the jobs have been created. Once you have that approval, you're almost at the stage of citizenship. Rebecca, do you want to talk about the consular processing for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Before that, Rebecca, Mona just said something very important, and I would like you to elaborate on it, because I know you are the absolute expert on SOF. Mona spoke about source of funds.
Yeah.
Nazreen, source of funds एक अहम तरीन चीज़ है जब आप US इमिग्रेशन वाया EB5 कंसिडर करते हैं। अमाउंट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं बदलती। आपकी बिजनेस हो, आप प्रोजेक्ट में अप्लाई कर रहे हो, रीजनल सेंटर के थ्रू अप्लाई कर रहे हो, the investment amount in T area remains 800,000. However, source of funds, कि वो funds कहाँ से आए, बहुत ही ज़रूरी एंगल है जिसको समझना ज़रूरी है, which Rebecca will explain to you. और उसकी वजह से आपकी एप्लीकेशन रिजेक्ट हो सकती है। या as lawyers are saying कि as lawyers it's also important कि अगर आपका source of funds सही नहीं हुआ, lawyers might say that we will not apply for your or submit your application. So Rebecca, please help us understand source of funds and its importance.
Oh, thank you, Aram. It is a very, very important process in the EB5 and also in the E2. So you have to show the US government, how did you lawfully, and that's the key word, how did you lawfully earn the funds? And you can't just show funds sitting in your account. You can't show, oh, I earn X amount of properties, or you have a certain net income. You have to actually show not only how did you earn the funds to invest in the project or the business in the US, you have to show the path of funds, which is very important as well. So if you earn the funds in Pakistan, how do you, a lot of people ask, how do I bring the funds to America? And those are ways that we would discuss with you and different options of how to bring that over. But I also want to show that it's not only Pakistan you have to earn the funds from as well. If you have businesses in Dubai or anywhere else, you could even have someone gift or loan you funds from the US. So there's different options. You just need to be sure that they were lawfully earned, so no criminal activities from, no black money, I should say, because a lot of people as well, we do deal with a lot of countries where, maybe Middle East, for instance, you don't have to pay taxes, so it's fine. But in India, in Pakistan, and other countries, taxes, you do have to pay taxes, right? And you are taxed in Pakistan on your worldwide income as well. So we have to show that. The US wants to see, are you a law-abiding citizen? Have you done what you're supposed to do in accordance to the law? So they do check your tax returns. So I want to stress how important that is, because a lot of people will just say, oh, I have so much, I have it, don't worry, here's ownership documents, not realizing how much detail goes into it. So we work with each client individually and making sure that we collect the right documents. If something doesn't work, we will tell you no. So we want to make sure it works for you. You can have multiple sources. So it doesn't have to come from one business or one sale of property. You can have multiple sources as well.
Sam, I have a question for you. Well, just before Wasim's question gets answered. In the US, we can use gifts and loans. Can you get a loan and declare a loan from a friend for the Caribbean?
No. Someone else can gift the sum to you, but it has to be irrevocable. So it's a gift that you don't have to pay back.
Okay.
With the Quebec Investor Program, it must happen 6 months before your application. But generally, no, it must be money you've earned. The difference between Canada and US is the fact that the question asked in our system is that you should declare your total net worth and how you accumulate those funds. In the US, I guess you just have to show the funds that are coming into the US, their source of lawful. In the Caribbean program, they ask these questions too. And one of the problem today is that the due diligence is far more accurate than it was a few years ago. So I was just presented again last week with a case that's refused. The applicant just mentioned 200,000 net worth, where he had to pay 100,000. But upon the due diligence report, they discovered the person has far more money. He's refused because his declaration is not correct. He mentioned he had about 200,000 net worth. They discovered he has far more than that. So therefore, his declaration is not accurate, and he misleaded the government. So he's being refused, and there's nothing we can do. So definitely net worth and describing how you have accumulated that much becomes more important, not just for US and Canada, in all programs.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, I've just received the message, and I would like to say share the questions with us or with me, and I will ask the questions accordingly. But an important question with US immigration: what is the rate of success if all applications, source of funds, path of funds, all in place, and the application is put in? What is the success rate?
Well, success rate for where? The US or Caribbean?
US. I'm sorry, the US.
It's quite high, given the fact that other areas of immigration don't have such a high threshold. But saying that, there are cases which get denied regularly, and the cases where areas where they get denied usually are source of funds, or there could be a project issue. But if within the source of funds, it could be through the source of funds, or it could be through a path of funds.
Yeah. I also want to stress too that the government do look at, if you have, as we discussed earlier, if you've applied for other visas before in the US. So they do compare what you filed in the past to what you're filing today. And they want to make sure that what you filed in the past matches what you filed today. So if you said, obviously they're not going to look at, you might have made more money. They do look at, who you've worked for. If you say that I worked for X person back in 1990, and then today you're saying you put a resume out and didn't even mention that company, we've had issues like that. So we do want to make sure that it's not just your source and just your background, everything matters as well. Not to say that the US is going to look at all your income, but they do want to be sure, have you been truthful to the US? Are you hiding anything? So do be careful when you're filing. If it's your first time, there should be no issues. But if you have filed cases before in the US or applied for applications, they do compare the files.
I think this is a very important pattern that is coming out. Earlier, just what Sam said, Mona has said, Rebecca, you're saying it again. Nazreen, correct information dena, in short, sach bolna, is very important. एक छोटे से स्टेप में एक गलत बात कह के या नेग्लिजेंस की वजह से आपका पूरा केस खराब हो सकता है. Whether it's Caribbean, as Sam said, they're catching up, whether it's a place like Turkey or whether it's the US. Honesty and truthfulness is clearly extremely important.
Definitely, especially in the new world where there's more data mining on people. There's integration of databases between countries. I mean, now it's very easy to verify stuff. And I see sometime in due diligence report of clients, because we commission them privately for certain clients just to see what will get out. And the clients are surprised that, oh, how come you know about this? Well, it's very easy now to go and to find out things about people, your companies, your bank accounts, your travel history, so and also who are your extended family.
They check social media also.
Yes.
Social
Well,
media.
there was an interesting case, citizenship revocation in Canada. I mean, this family applied for Canada. They got their residency. They went. They stayed many years, but they were not living in Canada. And they got their passports. So 5 years after, when it was time to renew their passports, somebody at the embassy decided to check their Facebook timeline of photos, and they realized during the time they said they were in Canada, all the photos were produced in Dubai. So that means they misrepresented themselves. So a report was made, and they lost their citizenship because they lied.
It's such an important aspect. So, reiterating the same point that honesty and transparency is very important. Now, we're repeatedly getting messages that audience have questions. So shall we take the questions? And Anas, I think you will help us through it.
Am I audible to you guys?
Yes.
Great. So I'll try if we can give you a glance of the audience that's been listening to you guys as well. Just a second. There you go. So you can see us, right?
Yes.
Hello.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna pass over the mic, and you guys would be able to hear the questions. If you don't, I will be happy to pass on the questions. Any questions from the audience? Okay, there.
Hello. मैं investment कर रहा हूँ E2 में.
We cannot hear them.
Hello. Okay.
Yes, better.
मैं E2 में invest कर रहा हूँ. तो मेरी जो amount है वो कैसे महफूज रहेगी जब तक मुझे वीजा नहीं मिल जाता, और उस पे टाइम जो लगेगा उस
सर आपकी आवाज सही नहीं आ रही. आप थोड़ा अगर करीब आ जाएं, अनस नहीं, आप अगर करीब ले आए तो फिर शायद इनकी आवाज क्लियर आए. इस वक्त थोड़ी एको भी कर रही है और समझ भी नहीं आ रही.
That's okay. You guys can just listen to what they're saying, and I will repeat the question.
Okay.
Please, आप इधर आके बैठिए.
मैं अपनी बेटी में इन्वेस्ट करना चाह रहा हूँ E2 में. तो उसके लिए जो टाइम पीरियड है उसमें मेरे पैसे जो मेरी रकम है वो कैसे महफूज रहेगी. मैं उसके मेरे हफ़ाज़त है.
Okay, so the question is that he is applying an E2 for his son, and he wants to know that while he's applying for the E2, how is his money safe? The investment amount, how is it safe?
Are you talking about E2 or EB5? Because if it's E2, the son has control of the money.
They're talking about E2.
The control of the money should be with your son.
Is it his own business? Because sometimes you might invest in a franchise.
What kind of business is it?
Yeah.
What kind of a business is that?
Medical.
It's something related to medical.
Okay, what kind of role does your son have in that business?
Doctor,
Okay.
you want to buy some business.
So he's saying that they're interested in buying a surgical equipment or medical related business. So they want to know if first they can buy it, how they can buy it, and during the process of E2, how is their money safe, and how do you
I see.
process it? Yeah.
I see. Well, first of all, the E2 business is different because from EB5, for example, because you have control over money. Your son has to be at least a 50% owner. And as far as keeping everything safe, that's done through what's called all the corporate documents to make sure that your son has the safeguards, the normal safeguards, which are there for these type of projects.
And at times we can, if you want, with the E2, which is good about that visa, is that your funds can be held in an escrow under the condition that it's released once the E2 is approved. So that can happen. So that way, if, let's say, for instance, he gets denied, the funds can be returned back to him from the escrow account. So those are things that, each case is individual. We would have to discuss, pros and cons for each individual cases, but that's an option with the E2 if you're purchasing a business.
I will get visa in Pakistan, Islamabad.
So he's asking that, will I apply for my visa here in my country?
Yes, at the consulate.
Yes.
At the consulate. And what's the process time of E2?
We've had E2s done in like 3 days in places like Switzerland. For Pakistan, it's a little longer, but it's not that long. I think it's just a question of getting an appointment.
Right. Appointment, depending.
It's not a big deal. It's important.
So they're saying that if appointment is not a big deal, then how long do you require to process an E2?
It's all about getting the documentation done. If the documentation is done quickly and you get the appointment, then you can get your visa very fast as well. E2, that's one of the advantages of E2s. They're very quick.
Hmm.
And
Thank you very much, everyone. Such a loaded panel, I must say. Uh, uh, since it was more about US and about the neighboring Canada, the question is especially to Sam. Uh, what is investment options in Canada which lead towards a citizenship or passport? And what are the threshold numbers of investment of years there? And what are the little details maybe in just short answer? Can you please advise?
Well, to quickly answer, currently the only passive pathway to get the permanent residency is the Quebec Investor Program. The threshold is 1.2 million Canadian dollar invested with the government of Quebec at 0% interest for 5 years. Um, that's the only passive way we have. There are other ways people have tried to create something passive. That was the case with the startups, where many people were selling their startup as a passive way to migrate to Canada, where they were paying anything between 70, 80,000 to 100, 200, 250, $200,000 for to get the permanent residency, unconditional one. But the government has clamped down on those. Now the startup applications are reduced substantially. They're now aware of the fraud. So, to answer your question quickly, Quebec Investor Program, but I foresee with the interest rate being high, the federal government rethinking of reintroducing the federal investor program, which in my opinion would be probably aligned along the Quebec program at 1.2 million, 5 year, no interest. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you very much.
do we have any
Welcome.
more questions? I think those are all the questions that we have.
Thank you, Ines.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mona, would you like to continue and give some more information about EB5?
Right. I think one of the other last questions that they had was what are the different options? And I just want to explain that under the new law, there was a change in the way that you could do things. So for EB5, you can do your own business, but if you do your own business, you can't have multiple people in that business. And well, you can, but if you do have multiple people, you would have to file it under what's called a regional center. You would have to rent a regional center. That's come under the new law that you can have no more pool direct projects. If you do your own project and it's just you, you have to have 10 full-time physical people, full-time jobs, positions. If there are multiple people, and we're filing through a regional center, then we don't have to have 10 physical people. We count it through a different sort of way. We verify it through what's called an economic report, and it passes through a regional center. So it can get a little complicated. If you don't want to do your own project, and often we recommend if it's a new country, it may not be the best thing to go out and do your own project if you're not sure, even if you're a fantastic entrepreneur in your own country. Every country is different. So maybe it is better just to get your green card and get a lay of the land. And if you want to get your green card through EB5, there are many projects available, good ones, all over the country. They tend not to give you a very high interest rate. But decent enough, maybe 1 or 2% that you get something. But the return of the capital is more important. And if you have a good project with a return of capital there, and you get your green card within 3 to 4 years, or you can even get it less. You can get your green card now within like a year and a half, but it becomes permanent by year 4. I think, and then you decide to go and do your own business. That's another option that you can do. If you just want to do business in the US and you don't want an EB-5 green card, then there are other ways too, like these non-immigrant visas. You don't have to even come in on an E2. You can do another non-immigrant visa like an L1. But
Right.
they're all long topics, but that's just pretty much in a nutshell.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sam, I would like to now move over to Canada, which is an equally desired destination for immigrants. However, COVID onwards, or from COVID or post-COVID onwards, we're seeing a lot of delays. There are various programs, federal, provincial, and so on, but there are a lot of delays happening, and the wait time is getting greater and greater. Can you shed some light on that? कि इतना टाइम क्यों लग रहा है, इतना टाइम क्यों बढ़ गया है Canadian immigration के लिए?
Well, the post-COVID has been.
I just add a question which just popped up. Somebody's Ejaz Ahmed. Kids are studying in Canada. How can they be eligible for a PR? But that let's take that after you.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to answer that within the first question. Well, first of all, post-COVID has introduced the work-home balance, which has affected Immigration Canada, where people are working from home many days a week. So that is, in my opinion, affecting a lot. But the most important would be about the fact that this current government, the Liberals, have decided to push the envelope of 250, 300,000 immigrants a year to over 500,000 people a year. And of course, a lot more students. I mean, up to a few months ago, we had about 900,000 foreign students living in Canada. So that's going to change. That has already started to change. Foreign students is being reduced now. They only will take students applying at credible major universities. So that's going to reduce that number. And because of this, we have a lot of problems in Canada, shortage of housing and everything. So the delays are primarily because the government has increased the numbers and they don't have the structure to deal with it. For example, we have so many portals for different programs and the portal is always down. It's not efficient. But that's going to change because they're reducing, in my opinion, a good 30-40% the number of applications we can take. But that will probably take a year or two before the backlog is cleared. In terms of also government philosophy, it's always been refugees, skilled, temporary workers. I mean, at a breakfast 2 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, with a very small group of people with the Federal Minister of Immigration, I asked them, I said, what's our current business immigration program? We don't have any. I mean, I said, if we take 3 individuals, let's say as an investor, if let's say Jeff Bezos wanted to move to Canada, we don't have a federal investor, or even the Quebec one is very difficult because he would have to speak French fairly well. So he couldn't qualify. If you take one of the best entrepreneurs in the world, let's say Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken, if he was alive and wanted to move to Canada, well, we don't take entrepreneurs. So that's not good. And if, let's say, one of the biggest self-employed persons in the world, Ronaldo, wanted to move to Canada to live as a self-employed, but the program is closed. They said, so what do we want? Who do we want? Do we want entrepreneurial skills, innovators? Startup program is closed almost. So that's causing, there's a rethinking, I think, in Canada as to how do we want things. In the meantime, everybody wants to come to Canada. And that's an issue. Now, regarding the gentleman's asking is about his children, I think the appetite to take in foreigners, especially students as permanent residents, is decreased. But in his particular case, I assume they're young, so they wouldn't qualify even for permanent residency because they're too young. They don't have the required experience. They don't have university. They don't have work experience. So it will be difficult. My take would be he should apply if he qualifies. And if the children are below 22, they will automatically be considered as an eligible dependent. So the trick would be him. Once they get the visa, all the family members, the applicant, the father here, or the mother, the spouse, and the eligible children, then keeping the visa becomes an individual challenge. So the parents could decide that if we're going to go back and forth, we might fulfill the residency requirements of 730 physical days in Canada within every 5-year period, and we might lose it, but at least the children are there. They're going to continue the education. Well, they can keep it. So a little same as the EB5 in the US.
But over here, I would like to highlight an important point for the audience. For Canadian program, there is a language requirement, which you need to clear, the IELTS exam. With US immigration, that requirement is not there. Mona, Rebecca, correct me.
No, there's no language requirement in the US at all.
At all. While Sam, it is a mandatory requirement for Canadian or Canadian
Well,
immigration.
it's logical. In the EB5 program, you don't need to actively run your program, so your business. So it's no need. But in Canada, if you come in as a skilled, well, how could you work in our country where we are bilingual? You need to know one or either or both of the official languages. And if you are a businessman, well, technically our investor program, Quebec, should not have a language requirement, but unfortunately it does. But other programs which are slightly entrepreneurial or even the self-employed as a startup visa, well, you need to be able to speak to communicate. So you need language skills. So that's a must. Well, I mean, in Canada, we are a little more realistic, I guess. Well, I mean, look at the UK, Mona. I mean, when we had the UK investor program, there was no language requirement. You know, it was fast, 2 months visa.
There's no language requirement there, and even under the skilled worker program, there's no language requirement. There is a language requirement for citizenship, as an FYI.
Same as in Canada, yes, very basic.
A lot of clients want to bring their parents. They want to become citizens, and so that their parents can then sponsor other children and whatever. And if the parent doesn't know how to speak English, there is a problem.
In naturalization.
Naturalization, yeah.
Now we have the same thing in Canada. We have the Canada Knowledge Test, and there's minimum language requirement. Of course, if you are within a certain age, you know, if you're above a certain age, and those requirements for the language is removed.
Sam, I would like just one more question regarding Canadian immigration. There are clearly two forms, which is a federal immigration and then a provincial.
Yes.
Can you shed some light on that? That what's the difference? Which one is better than the other, or not? Are they the same?
Under our constitution, the laws are divided between provinces, states, and the federal government. Article 91 and 92. Immigration is a federal jurisdiction. Therefore, immigration must be. The visas are always issued by the federal government. Now, traditionally, up to about 15 years ago, it was the federal always issuing visas, even if you wanted to go to different provinces, except the province of Quebec, where for the last 30 years they have their own selection, but they could not issue visas. But in the last 15 years, we have seen the emergence of different provinces coming up and saying, well, our needs are different. I mean, Atlantic Canada has different needs than British Columbia. So they came up with the provincial nominee program, where provinces can decide on who is going to live in their province, and they'll do the selection process only. And the issuing of the visa, which is medical, security, and background checks, that will stay with the federal jurisdiction. Now, this has become quite complicated because we have 10 provinces, 3 territories. So technically you have 14 selection systems that can select you. 10 of the provinces, 3 of the territories, and the federal government. So based on that, you have to do a thorough study of what you want, where you want to go, and how can you qualify to be selected. And then, of course, at the second stage, to see if you can fulfill the federal requirements to receive the permanent residency. Once you are a permanent resident, it is the federal immigration law that's going to look after how look after you, which is how you're going to keep your residency, and the Citizenship Act, which is in the future, 3 years after, when can you apply for your citizenship. So that's why the selection has become quite, in my opinion, um, difficult, because what to do? Well, 30 years ago, it was simple. It was either the federal skilled worker, entrepreneur, self-employed, or investor, or Quebec investor, skilled, or entrepreneur. So that was easy. It was Quebec or the federal to be selected, either one. But now, with the province of moving onto this space of selection, it's laborious.
Sam, there's a question which I don't believe we've answered, and I'm quite interested to know what the answer is. The question is to you, and if you want to put it on the screen again, please. This is Wasim Ashfaqs. I think he's writing for several people. It says, Sam, I own 25% non-voting shares in a small business in Canada. I run that company remotely, and it has a genuine business average of 75,000 Canadian dollars. Can I immigrate to Canada based upon that business ownership?
Well, the fact that the person has 25 non-voting, this shows that he doesn't really control the business, because we want to know if he effectively controls. And in here, it doesn't look. I mean, there's a lot of data. I need to properly answer that, but that's the first thing. Second, 75,000, is that the income or net after operations? Those are another things, because if he wants to, for example, to utilize these numbers to come in with 75,000 Canadian. Now, if it's net income, that's sufficient. But then that is the business. What is his share? If we say 25% of 75,000 net, that's not much to live in Canada, not these days. Second, if it's 75,000 total sales, well, what is the net? So I guess I need more data. But yes, today, if someone has a business in Canada, is controlling that business, they can utilize that to get a temporary work permit to come to Canada. And once they're here for, I would say, 1 or 2 years, they can apply for the PR. But then again, it depends on the province, because if the person is living in Quebec, there's a different set of rules than if the person is living, let's say, in Ontario or outside of Quebec. Okay.
Thank you.
But then again, I think people need to really see, as we just said initially, what do they want? Do they really want to migrate? Or do they just want residency? Do they want just another citizenship, or second or third citizenship?
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Question is, do we have time?
Yeah, no, I think we've gone over time. Well, they kept us waiting. We were late.
Yes.
Nope.
All right.
No.
So, wrapping up, I would like to say it has been a privilege to have Sam Bayat, Mona Shah, and Rebecca Singh in Pakistan. This is the beginning. And we will be there along with these experts, these veterans of the industry, more often in Pakistan to answer your questions. Because इस बार हमने primarily US के बारे में, Canada के बारे में और थोड़ा सा Caribbean के बारे में बात की है. However, Mona और Sam दोनों world wide global immigration जानते हैं, समझते हैं और करते आ रहे हैं. So हर थोड़े दिन में हम आपसे बात करेंगे इसके बारे में, और जो भी आपके सवाल हो आप हमें लिखिए, हमें बताइए, पूछिए. Feel free to call us, contact us. The contact information is available over there. The booths are there. Bayat Practice का और Mona Shah Associates Global का, जिसमें हमारी information available है. You please reach out, take our brochures. The information is there how to contact us, and we look forward to staying in touch with you through this platform and other platforms in Pakistan. Thank you very much. Panel.
Thank you for the invitation. Have a nice day. Have a good Friday. Okay. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.